welcome everybody to this meeting of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. I'm just going to go through the guidelines for the meeting that are on the screen here. So all participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. If you could please rename yourself to include your first name, your last name, and affiliation should you have one, that would be fantastic. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function, and you can find this in various areas depending on which version of Zoom you're using. You can find it at the bottom of your screen and the toolbar at the bottom. If it's not there, maybe under the excuse me, under the reactions button. And if it's not there, you may need to go into the chat area, and it may be in there. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And should you have any technical difficulties, you can contact me, Matt Archer, via the chat box at marcher@ctps.org or at 857-702-3708. I apologize for actively losing my voice. Len, back to you.
Oh, thank you, Matt. And so, I think we have a fairly easy agenda, and it's not a terribly crowded room. And so we're going to just do a quick round of introductions, and I will call people out by name. Okay, so we'll start with Matt Archer.
Sure, I'm Matt Archer, MPO staff.
And Ann McGann.
Ann McGann, I'm the project manager for the Long Range Transportation Plan for the Boston MPO.
Great. Kate White.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kate White. I'm the Public Outreach Coordinator at the Boston Region MPO.
And let's see, Scott Zizakis.
Hi everyone, I'm Scott Zidakis, and I'm the vice chair of this group. And I apologize, I'm gonna have to leave a little early, but I'm also with the National Rural Transit Assistance Program.
Great. John McQueen.
John McQueen, Walk Boston. And Matt, you're sounding like an air flight attendant going through the whole, you're great at that.
I'm honored, thank you.
Yes.
John Seward.
John Seward, Move Mass.
It's his birthday.
Great, thank you. AC Fregosa.
Anna Christina Fregoso with the Boston Society of Civil Engineers.
Thank you. Laura Weiner.
Laura Weiner, Watertown Planning Department.
Thank you. Barry Steinberg, can you talk? He's on phone. He may not be in a position to talk. All right, we'll move on. And Alita Lisa. Might be another phone-only person. Is that *6 for activating mic? So
Correct.
If you are
it looks
phone,
like they're connected through computer audio though, so they may just not have a microphone.
Gotcha. Thank you, Matt. Fred Mosley.
Fred Mosley with the American Council of Engineering Companies.
Great. And Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe with the Boston Transportation Department.
And let's see. Owen McDonald.
Owen McDonald, Town of Weymouth.
And Sarah Lee.
Hi, everybody. This is Sarah Lee. I'm the Assistant Director of Transportation at MAPC.
Thank you. Just scrolling back up the list. John Strauss.
This is John Strauss from the Burlington Transportation Committee.
Great. Thank you. And I'm saving Emily for last. And I am Len Diggins. I'm from the MBTA Rider Oversight Committee, and I'm the co-chair. Well, yeah, co-chair along with Scott, and technically chair, but I like to share the responsibility. So we have one more person coming in. That's CDD ETP. CDD ETP? All right. Well, we'll let that one go. So first on the agenda is Emily Torres Cullinane from MAPC to talk with us about MetroCommon 2050 and how it fits in with the LRTP, and Anne McGann will be joining her on that also. So with this, I will allow Emily to tell us a little more about herself as a way of introduction, and then launch into what she has to tell us about the MetroCommon 2050. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for having us here. I know I saw some of you perhaps on the MPO call a couple of weeks ago when we talked briefly about MetroCommon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our long range plan. Before I get started, since it is a small group, I can kind of see everyone all in like one frame. Could I see a show of hands? So if you go down to your reactions button and you like raise your virtual hand, can I see a show of hands of who has actually participated in MetroCommon meetings or briefings or visions or focus groups in the past 3 years? I'm dangerously asking this question. I hope it's a good amount.
No problem. And Matt, if you want, you can drop us into out of the shared screen briefly, maybe into the gallery view. There you go. Thanks, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So not maybe like a little less than half, but at least I do see some hands on here. So my name again is Emily Torres Cullinane. I am the co-director of strategic initiatives at MAPC. And for the past 3.5 years, I would say we've been working on MetroCommon, our vision for the future. And when I say our, I definitely mean Metro Boston's vision for the future. Within it, there is planning around housing and climate and thinking about our land use and of course, transportation. It's definitely been a challenging process, I would say, especially as we went virtual last year and in the moment, try to adjust all of our planning to, the crazy things that have been happening the past year. But actually in a good way, we were able to, I think, engage even more people through virtual meetings and focus groups. So that's why I asked that question. Definitely wanted to see who we've had in our small breakout rooms. So I have a PowerPoint presentation and I'm going to go over specifically the transportation goals and recommendations. I'm also going to use our MetroCommon website because that's where everything is. So we can kind of bop around the website. I'm going to hit share screen and I think I can do that. I think I have access to sharing my screen. Is that right?
You should.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Perfect. All right, here we go. So I don't have, again, too many slides, but I wanted to at least to give you a little bit of more information. So after doing sort of the visioning about what people wanted in MetroCommon for 2050, we did narrow it down to 5 areas of action. So different than Metro Future, I think we are very much focused on policy recommendations and really getting to those action steps sooner than later. I'll also mention that MetroCommon builds off of Metro Future. And so, we didn't kind of start from scratch. We kind of checked our last regional plan. And the 5 action areas are equity of health and wealth, homes for all, inclusive growth and mobility, which we'll be talking about today, climate mitigation and resiliency, and dynamic and representative government. So one of the first things that we did is we really needed to understand sort of the system around what is inclusive growth and mobility. This is just a screen share of many PowerPoint slides on sort of this system. We asked ourselves sort of all kinds of questions on, the history, where we are now in the region, what the goals are for the future. And these are some of those goals. So I'm just gonna read through these and we can discuss them in a moment. So having transit infrastructure that is well maintained and funded and its capacity is greatly expanded through the improvement of existing service and the strategic addition of new services so that daily travel is convenient, pleasant, and reliable. The transit system provides more opportunity for circumferential travel throughout the region and reverse commutes between the inner core and suburbs. Certainly, I think that is definitely one to continue to think about and talk about as the work from home situation has changed and people are traveling at much different times and maybe in different directions. The transportation system is designed and operated to ensure access to opportunity for everyone, with a particular emphasis on neighborhoods historically and underserved by high quality transit. Local land use policies and new development support increase mobility by encouraging concentrated growth around transit and the services people need. Bicycle, pedestrian, and other personal mobility infrastructure is safe, extensive, high quality, and linked to other modes so that people frequently use active transportation as a preferred mode of travel. I think this is another area that sort of increased in interest over the past year. Transportation options in the region are net zero for carbon emissions, contributing to improved air quality and reducing negative climate impacts. Luckily, I think we passed some policies at the beginning of the year that touch upon this one. Public and active transportation options are affordable for those least able to pay. All modes of transportation, including innovative technologies, are safely integrated, resulting in few transportation-related injuries and zero fatalities annually. And state and local governments work together with businesses and property owners and advocates to create seamless travel throughout the region, including first mile and last mile connections. So hopefully those goals are goals that speak to you and to the work that you do. And you know, we didn't miss something there. And so with these goals, we had a series of policy recommendations, and there's two that stick out that I'm going to sort of have you look over. I'm going to share the link with you in the chat. But one is improving accessibility and regional connectivity as sort of a big strategy. And the second one is reduce the need for single occupant vehicle travel through increased development and transit-oriented development and walkable centers. I'm going to stop sharing here. And actually what I would like to do is have you take a look at the policy recommendations on your own computers because there are definitely a lot of them. And I wanted to give you a moment to digest them. So I believe, can everyone see those two links that I'm putting in the chat? All right, so I definitely wanted to get you over to the MetroCommon website so that you're able to see these two areas of policy. I can also share my screen as well. All right. So one of the recommendations, improve transportation accessibility and regional connectivity, has a few strategies, 4 strategies associated to it. The first one, and let me just fix the view here, a little bigger. Improve the reliability and accessibility of the region's public transit service. And like I said, each strategy has very specific actions. And so if you can take a moment and kind of scroll through the actions, I would love to hear of these actions, what kind of stands out to you. And also, you know, we say things like the MBTA will, or MassDOT will, or the legislature will. So this is definitely not a plan that MAPC can do on its own. So I'll let you kind of scroll through here. Second strategy, reimagine our roadway corridors that lead into downtown Boston to encourage higher occupancy modes and discourage single occupancy vehicle travel. And last, create safe, accessible, and well-connected networks of safe cycling and walking infrastructure. And there's actually one last one. Shape new and emerging mobility services to support local and regional transportation goals of safety, reduced traffic congestion, less greenhouse gas emissions, and equitable access for all people. Right. So I'm just kind of giving you a moment to read through this. And I'll just put on this, I'll pop on the screen the other one. Oh, I don't know if I can get to it. Sorry, the controls are not letting me get to that tab. All right, I can go back, share my screen. All right, so the last one here, reduce vehicle miles traveled. And then there are 3 strategies associated. I think I gave you enough time to kind of take a look. Facilitate transit-oriented and other smart growth development. Ensure site design, land use program, development characteristics to prioritize walkability and affordability, and require new developments to focus their transportation mitigation on producing fewer single occupant vehicle trips. Okay, so I think I'm gonna stop there. And again, please feel free to continue digging through the policies. But in terms of MetroCommon, we're sort of in that stage where we're cleaning everything up. And then in the fall, we'll be launching sort of the full report with more data and research that will be on a MetroCommon website. All right, so now I can take some questions and comments, and I'm also here with my colleague, Sarah Lee. And I see, is it AC Fragoso?
Yes, I just had a quick question as far as, have you presented this plan at all? To whom have you presented it to?
Yes, great question. So over the past, I would say 5 to 6 months, we've had sort of one-on-one interviews with people in the transportation field. We've had focus groups. Actually, I think there's a few of you, people that raised their hand that may have attended these focus groups. We've spoken to legislators and, sort of vetted these recommendations through also our external advisory committee. And so Anne McGann is on that, as well as Walk Boston and a couple of other organizations.
Oh, okay, because I was just wondering how that fair needs-based fair plan went down with the T. But also a lot of the T is currently already on their own. They're promoting a resiliency and sustainability. So they're heavily involved in getting the Envision program credits for most of their projects.
Right, and I think as best we could too, we took a look at any sort of long range plans that existed with MassDOT and the T and connecting with them to try to incorporate. And Sarah, I don't know if there's anything you can add there on that.
Yeah, I'll just briefly add that some of the ideas on here were formulated, 2+ years ago at this point. So some of the things regarding smart growth near transit, that has changed on a policy level over the last year in terms of the requirements that are at the state level. So some of these things may seem like old news, but they weren't old news 2 years ago. And so we're kind of wading through this weird area where some policies have already been enacted, but we still feel like this is the roadmap that we want to lay out for the region, and just kind of, document our desire for those things to happen if they haven't already.
Great, thank you so much. John, I see your hand.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Great presentation. Regarding that low fare, means tested lower fare, I guess the newer thinking, and I guess that came out of a recent op-ed through Ben Foreman, which is that this on the MBTA commuter rail, it really should be self-funding. I think the obstacle for MBTA has been that they've been trying to find funding for it. Well, it really doesn't need it because their ridership is so low that they don't need any incremental assets really at all on the line, and even if it's lower fares, would be incremental fare. So that's just one point. Secondly, I think last Monday, Governor Baker was on TV saying that the center of gravity in Massachusetts is moving from the inner core. And I think that's where a lot of our focus has been on the LRTP, especially the land use end of it, Chapter 9, as well as this. And I think the rethinking of, especially since COVID, is that it is moving farther west out to the suburbs almost on a permanent basis, perhaps. So that's something to consider, and whether or not you match up more fluid access for any of the existing rail assets by bringing on DMUs or EMUs to get more of a rapid transit light rail feature for these systems, both on reverse commute and inbound commutes to wherever. Anyway, just a thought.
Absolutely. It's a great point, John. And I think one of the things that we noticed when we did Metro Future, which is our previous plan, is that it had very specific sort of strategies and goals and objectives with percentages that sort of became sort of out of date very quickly. And so this policy agenda is really like a 5-year policy agenda. And the idea is to continue to update, because as you just noted, already this might be out of date, or we might be moving in a different direction. And so the idea is really to continue to check in on this and update these policies and have conversations like the one that we're having today, so that we're adjusting as needed. So thank you for that. John? I can't hear you. I don't know if you're still on mute.
John Strauss.
There we go. Yep, I was on mute. You're all right. Anyway, I just wanted to ask about action 1.3. If there's been any progress in integrating, because that's what Burlington is at. We're at the one end of the MBTA, and then we connect with a couple of RTAs. So has there been any progress done on integrating the fare structure? And do you think that could also be extended to microtransit as well?
Well, I'm going to take a look at Sarah here to see if there's any conversations that she and the transportation planners have had at MAPC more recently on this topic.
Yeah, so sorry, I was just trying to flip to make sure I knew what number 1.3 was. My understanding is that there are definitely plans to implement kind of across the board fare system on the T moving forward with their new fare transformation, that you'll be able to, ride the Orange Line as well as the commuter rail on the same card. So we feel that that's a strong priority for the T, and they do too.
Okay, and if I could just ask, because we're a little bit further out from that, so is there any plans to integrate a fare system with the bus part of the MBTA and the RTAs and the buses they run further out to the 495 communities?
That's definitely something that's been discussed. I think, the RTAs are still, I think, thinking deeply about whether they should charge any fares at all, and whether that's a productive use of their funds to spend collecting fares. So there's a lot of simultaneous conversations happening right now, but my understanding is that the T is, with their new fare collection system, planning to allow for tie-ins from other systems, but whether that's the T's responsibility or that's the responsibility of the RTA, I think that's kind of TBD at this point. But I think the T, all of the discussions that I've been a part of, I think they really understand the value of having a seamless transition from one service to another. And so I think the conversations are going that way, and the new fare collection system will allow for that ability, which currently it doesn't.
Right. Thank you very much. Cool. Thank you again.
We welcome any other comments or questions. Can you post the goals again? Yes. can do that.
So, well, I do have some questions, but I also want to allow Anne McGann to speak first about how this will fit into the LRTP, and then maybe after that, hopefully some of my questions will be answered, but then I'll chime in with anything I have left over. So is this the right time for that, Emily, or do you have something else?
Please.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
and I'm gonna post the full sort of link of the goals here. That way, if you have any questions on those, you can go back. But go ahead, Anne.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Emily, for the update on MetroCommon. So what I'd like to do is update on how MetroCommon will fit into the development of our next long-range transportation plan. And we are calling that Destination 2050. The current plan is Destination 2040. The new plan will be Destination 2050, extending the horizon year out to 2050. And it will cover the same time frame as MetroCommon. So as a note, our new LRTP will have to be adopted in spring of 2023. So for coordination with MAPC on MetroCommon, as the MPO staff is updating the LRTP goals and objectives, we will review all of MetroCommon's goals for those that pertain to our transportation planning process and identify ways that we can coordinate those goals. So Emily went through the MetroCommon's mobility goals, and many of these goals have elements of our current safety, capacity management, and equity goals. So staff will do a complete review of all of the MPO's current goals along with MetroCommon's goals. We will also look at the policy recommendations and identify any opportunities for coordination with MAPC so that we can implement the policies from both MetroCommon and those that we establish as part of the new LRTP. So for our scenario planning process, we'll also coordinate with MAPC on scenarios that were done as part of the development of MetroCommon. So MAPC presented information on these scenarios at an MPO meeting in February of this year. And at that meeting, key uncertainties were discussed, including regional demographics and the economy and the future of travel. So we will also work with MAPC on demographic projections as needed for different scenarios that the MPO will prioritize as part of Destination 2050. And we'll also work with MAPC, MassDOT, and the other MPOs in the state to develop the final demographic projections for 2050 that will be used in the adopted plan. But we can have varying sets of assumptions when we do our scenario planning. So any assumptions that we may use in that scenario planning, we will definitely work closely with MAPC to come up with that information. So in addition to coordinating with MAPC, I just want to give you a quick update on other ongoing and upcoming activities on the Destination 2050 development. Staff is now in the process of finishing up the Unified Planning Work Program study, informing the big ideas for the MPO scenario planning. We gathered input from the public through 8 focus groups, getting their ideas on what they think will be the driving forces that will shape our future transportation system. This input will help us to lay the groundwork for our scenario planning efforts as part of the next LRTP. Some of the ideas that we heard include looking at how more people working at home might affect the transportation system, transit expansion, especially looking at electric buses, climate change and the resiliency of the transportation system, and what the population, housing, and employment might look like in the future. And this information, the information on the Big Ideas study, will be presented to the MPO later this summer. Using that information, the MPO can develop a prioritized list of scenarios that staff will analyze to help establish recommendations for the new LRTP. And then staff will work with the modeling group to start our model runs for the scenarios. Information from the scenario planning process can then be used to help the MPO make policy decisions for Destination 2050. So we're hoping to start the first scenario this fall. We're also beginning to update our needs assessment, looking at the existing and future transportation needs in the region. And we know that your group has been going through the current needs assessment and are looking forward to your input and ideas. So, and this information will also help to make revisions as needed to the MPO's vision, goals, and objectives. So we're also in the process of developing a new web page for the LRTP and the needs assessment, which will include information on the Destination 2050 development process, as well as outreach information on the plan as it becomes available. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Ann. And so John McQueen.
Yeah, hi. Good to see you, Ann. In terms of moving forward, I think that the UPWP component of the future of the curb in the last 12, 18 months has really taken an incredibly larger role and scope in terms of, again, moving with that center of gravity to more of the outburbs versus the inner core, making them more viable and enriching, and then also kind of trying to perhaps add to that what kind of interrelationships for economic development or quality of life are fed to the curbs in these new parklets and outdoor dining and things like that that have evolved, and how are they related to the non-motorized initiatives that are really going forward and that are going to be more important, off-road bike and pedestrian facilities, similar to the kind that are, let's say, Bruce Freeman or in Natick, which is really being very dynamic, feeding to the commuter rail, as well as a lot of employment areas like MathWorks and things like that with their rail trail and such. But and then feeding the downtown Natick areas, just how those work really together and getting a more quantified look at it, just for moving to the future. As you said, plan for it rather than react to it.
Right, and we actually did do a future of the curb study. So part of the needs assessment is to look at all of the studies and all of the analyses and the work that the MPO is doing, as well as pulling in all of the studies, as Emily said, that all the other agencies are doing as well. We're also, for resiliency, we're actually meeting with the MBTA and MassDOT and you know, coordinating with them on resiliency of the system. So as part of the needs assessment, it's looking at what's out there now. So we'll be pulling all that information and looking at what the different land uses are now, which will be part of coming up with our future demographics or any demographics that we may want to look at as part of scenario planning, which could move, you know, as you said, the center of, you know, out to the suburbs. So that'll be part of the scenario planning process, and we'll work with MAPC on that, but also working with the state and the other MPOs to come up with what the final set of demographics will be for the final plan. So we'll be looking at all of that information and including that as part of the needs assessment. And then obviously be at the incorporating it into the final plan.
Thanks.
All right, Jen.
Hi, thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Emily and Ann. Summary there. I just first would like to compliment Emily and the folks at MIPC. I really like the action items, how specific they are, and they call out who the actors are. One of my questions was going to be the timeline for each of them, but it sounds like 5 years is the overarching goal for each of those, which is fantastic. I guess my question, since some of them, for example, the one about, you know, experimenting with congestion pricing on a highway seems like something that would need some organizing, or like may not already be in the works. Maybe I'm not aware of some conversations, but I was just curious if how MAPC is thinking about getting some of those conversations going and like in the public consciousness a little bit more, or like creating urgency around some of these, and if there's ways that the advisory council or each of the members might contribute to that.
Jen, that's an excellent question, and I love that it's an implementation question. So right now, over the summer, we're trying to think about, as we clean this up, as we wrap this up, before the launch, what are those key people, organizations, nonprofits, advocacy organizations, groups like this one that can help move this work forward. I will say this particular past planning process, we also dabbled a little bit in producing videos and using sort of art and culture as a way to sort of bring up some topics and have a little bit more of that emotional connection to all of this work. I think that is something municipalities have asked us for, which is marketing. They don't have money or the expertise or capacity to move some of the things that we're talking about, whether it relates to affordable housing or transportation that you just mentioned. And so that is something that's kind of interesting and different that I would say we've used. I'm actually going to put in here the YouTube channel, and you can see we did a short film with a local filmmaker, and we captured some stories. So Jen, this is not directly answering your question. It's sort of like we are thinking about implementation, and we definitely come back to this table, and we'd invite you to share with us any creative ideas. But I definitely think more and more in this world of we're virtually connected. I don't think virtual meetings are going to go away 100%. And so, what are those modern tools that we can use to push this work forward?
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, no, that's helpful. Glad you're all thinking that way. I know that BTD, we're trying to do more storytelling, and certainly the pandemic has been an impetus for that in terms of being able to reach people where they're at. So it's great to see that MEPC is thinking along those lines too.
Yeah, I hope virtual meetings don't go away even 1%, but that's me, I'm so much more productive with these things, so.
As a side note, we are doing some research on hybrid engagement. So if any of you are interested in that, we can always come back.
Sure. Great. Yeah. Cool. So I'm just looking to see if there are more hands. Yeah. Because Jen actually asked a flavor of the question that I had in mind, and you had great answers for it. So I'm wondering, to what extent is there like an implementation committee at MAPC for your MetroCommon plan or the previous Metro Future?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And so throughout this process, we had an advisory committee that helped us throughout this phase. We're hoping that those people that made up the advisory committee then become people that will sort of help implement the plan. I'm trying to develop what that looks like, whether it's a formal implementation committee, but we do have our MAPC council. So MAPC has 101 cities and towns. There's a representative from each municipality. We have gubernatorial seats, ex officio seats. And so our executive council has an executive committee, and the executive committee is what has traditionally been sort of the group used to implement Metro Future, our previous plan. So Leonard, definitely our executive committee. I don't know if there will be like a subcommittee. We have a legislative committee that also is very much focused on all of this policy. And if you were to look at MAPC's current list of policy that we're working on for this legislative session, it already incorporates MetroCommon. So that's how we're thinking of, at least in the short term, pushing this work forward. But I'm very interested in hearing about new and different ways of doing partnership to implement this work.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be really good, to have something like that. Even if it already exists, whatever that group is, just kind of report out on a regular basis. If not annually, then maybe every 2 or 3 years or so that people can get a sense of how things are moving. But more importantly, if they aren't, then why they aren't moving, which kind of takes me to my other question. That is, when you look at Metro Future, go back and look at that and see, things that didn't happen. Is there going to be an explanation and maybe the introductory part of MetroCommon as to why some of those goals weren't achieved?
That's a really good question. And we did, to the best of our ability, we took a look at all the strategies and the sub-strategies and ended up being, Metro Future had 65 goals, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of strategies. Sometimes we also think that the process of the way that we made it also made it kind of hard to then analyze, to do that evaluating. But we definitely tried to fold over as much of Metro Future as we could when we were creating MetroCommon. It is a good question, though, of, you know, why did things not perhaps move forward? And that's why we took a little bit more of like a systems approach. Again, when we started MetroCommon, and we have these areas of like action.
Good. So yeah, you know, well, it's a good plan, and so much work goes into it that I feel that the focus on implementation, or that setting the stage for the implementation, is important, and you clearly feel that way too. And so any way that we can help with that, please let us know as the advisory council, and who sits on the MPO, as you know, the board, but also as individual members who, I think a lot of us are pretty active in our communities, and can talk to other folks and say this is a priority for us. That said, I also know that a lot of people in our communities, especially those who work for towns, already feel the same way that we do about these things. And so I guess it's really a matter of how do we all get mobilized. And I think to a large extent, we look towards someone or an entity like the MAPC to help give us some guidance, because you do have that broader perspective and that link into other communities much more so than individual communities do with each other. So if you ask us for help, I think a lot of us are willing to give it to you, because we often don't know how to ask for the help. So I don't know if that made sense, but
no, I mean, I'm definitely thinking about it, and because our focus groups went so well in the sense of like bringing people who had never actually met each other before. We want to be able to continue that that effort and that initiative. And so what I did right now is I shared with you MAPC's current council list. As you can see, there are some vacancies. And so if you live in one of these cities or towns, you're already doing stuff because you're already here. But if you have neighbors or, you know, people that you would love to recommend to the council, please let me know. And then that's part of sort of mobilizing people as well. And I'm going to put my email in the chat as well.
Great.
And then I think that answers, and John, you had a question about Burlington, so.
And Len, I just to remember too, we'll review all of the strategies and see at a regional level what we can do to help implement as part of the MPO as well. So that can also be, you know, that's one of the first things we'll coordinate with MAPC on is seeing what are the ones that we can help to implement. And as you know, MassDOT and the MBTA is on the board, so we can work with them as well.
Right. Well, thank you once again. If there are any more questions, now's the time. And I'll ask Anne to hang around for a couple more minutes after.
Yep.
All right. And everyone else, Emily and Sarah, if you want to hang around too, that's fine. But if you want to go, I totally understand too, because we all have plenty to do. And so once again, thanks, when you talked to the MPO, I said I very much wanted to have you talk to the advisory council, because it's our chance to get a deeper dive at things, and I want to try to limit the questions that I ask at the MPO meetings. So thanks again. All right.
Well, thank you for having us. And again, it's an open door. Send me a message, and we're very happy to talk about implementation. I'm really glad you brought that up.
Great. Yes. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, Anne, we're going through the needs assessment, chapter 9 today, and then chapter 10 later on, and I think it'll really put us in a good position to commenting on the next set needs assessments. So when do you think we might be able to get to the earliest look at them?
At what?
The needs assessment for the upcoming LRTP?
Well, we're going to be working on it over the next year.
Okay.
So it's obvious, you know, we haven't gotten so deep into it. We're trying to finish up with, you know, get the scenarios ready, but we're just in the process of starting up the update of that right now.
Right, right.
It probably won't be for another year.
Okay. All right. So we have some time, you know, so because I think one of the things that we'll want to do is look at the recommendations and to meet those needs and get a sense as to how they may have worked or not worked. And I don't know if that'll really inform the needs, because the needs are going to be what they are, but it will inform the way we come at the next set of recommendations. But I'll say it again. I'm impressed with the thoroughness of that document, and so in this chapter 9, I thought was a really good chapter. It's a small one, but it's an important one, and so we'll cover that. When?
And we actually, it is a smaller one, and we did, MAPC actually does a lot of that work with us as well. So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
helped a lot with that particular economic vitality chapter.
Yeah, it's a smaller one, but I think it's a very important one. I won't say the most important one, although I will say that you all almost said it was the most important one, because on page 9.3, you said the ultimate goal of regional planning is to coordinate investments in housing and employment centers with investments in transportation infrastructure. So if ultimate isn't a bit of a lofty word, I don't know what is, but I agree with it, and so a lot of times people will make grandiose, I use that word loosely, statements in their introduction, but a lot of times when you get into the detail, you'll find out what people really think is important. And I thought that one really summed it up in a nice way, because it is really about connecting, planning, for housing and employment centers with transportation, because as I often say to people, especially me, because housing is a big deal to a lot of folks, and employment, of course, but if you can't get there, there is no there, at least no functional there. Dare I say, our existence is really based on transportation. You got to get things from one place to another, and what you get from one place to another depends on the transportation network. And so we may not have a lot of money to spend here at the MPO, but if we spend it the right way, we can really do a lot of good. And so I think that's why this is worth the work. But then, of course, I'm going to rationalize it, being involved in it as much as I am. So with that, I'll ask people if they have anything that they want to comment on Chapter 9 of needs assessment. Mr. McQueen.
Hey, hi.
Hi.
Again.
Oh, I love it. No, thanks. You're reading along. Yeah, go ahead.
This is a question for Ann in the, it referenced down in public transit, personal rapid transit. What is personal rapid transit?
Where are you looking?
I was looking, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bullet points down from public transit. It says study cost.
Do you know what page you're on?
I think it was 9 or 10. Was it 9 or 10? No, 10 or 11.
Oh, public transit. Okay, you were under the public comments.
Yeah. Personal rapid transit. My feet.
Well, this is what we heard from the public.
Yeah.
So let me find it.
I'm just curious as to what that would be.
Oh, it's probably the DMUs and what you were talking about before. Yeah. if I,
That's kind of collective, but,
probably.
you know,
right,
it can be personal, I guess, if you get, you know, break down the social distancing.
right. So, yeah, I'd have to go back and look at what the comments were. You know,
Yeah,
this was like 3 years ago. So I'd have to go
Yeah,
back and pull that.
I just didn't know what the concept was, what the mode really was.
Right.
Thanks.
That's a good question. I missed that one, but yeah, I think I would have had that question too, because I mean, I have a similar question. It's on page 913. It was like the use of longitudinal employer
Yeah.
hyphen household dynamics to track employment. And I mean, I can look it up, maybe, but I was just kind of curious as to what it is. I mean, I understand each of the words independently, but when I put them all together, I'm not
GPS?
quite sure. You know, well, I was thinking like it's a data series, you know. So, anyways, I mean, I'll look it up, you know. So, but I thought a lot of the public suggestions were very good, and it. I'm looking forward to reading chapter 10 more to see the recommendations and or at least refresh my mind as to the recommendations. But I'll I see Andy has his hand up. Sorry, I was looking at my other screen, Andy. And sorry,
All
I didn't
right,
introduce you.
is my sound coming through? I was having trouble earlier this afternoon.
Yes, yes, it is. And we missed you in the go-arounds. I saw you right after we stopped going around.
No worries. I hopped on a couple minutes late. So longitudinal employer housing dynamics is a census product, which I actually used when I was at CTPS working there. So it's one that I know pretty well. So it was one that was probably new at the time that the long-term, the LRTP was created. So I guess one comment that I had, I actually passed this chapter to the economic development planner in my department, and they actually were really impressed by how many different programs are out there. That table was actually really helpful for them. They had never seen it laid out that way, so they just wanted to say, please keep that for the next one, because, you know, it really did help them just see what it is that, you know, the MPO and MAPC have available in thinking about these questions, because I think these are ones that will continue to come up in the next 4 or 5, 10 years, you know? So I just want to make that plug. And I guess the
Andy,
other thing,
the table are you talking about?
the table 9.1.
9.1, okay, yeah, and we set that up for each of the chapters.
Yeah.
So that it kind of is a summary of what's to come. So
Yeah, they were just happy to see just kind of where there's existing programs and proposed programs by topic, because I think it's really hard to get through the rest of the document and really see that, but having it laid out on the table was really nice. So I also agreed and just wanted to make that comment. And I think overall, you know, the programs and policies, I think just make sense. I think where we, you know, we were thinking about, because we've been having conversations in Cambridge about, you know, there's still kind of a COVID shock going on economically. And so that's playing out. And we know that in particular, the labor shock has been really noticeable in the hospitality and food service industries. And so we were just kind of conversing about, you know, how this plays into late night transportation in particular. It was hard before the pandemic to really fill those jobs, and it's only become even more difficult with you know, some shifts going on with the labor market in many of the places around the country in disarray when it comes to these industries. So, you know, maybe there does need to be something specific to the moment in the next needs assessment that kind of, you know, puts a bound around, like, this is a very specific COVID thing that we do need to be aware of in terms of the needs assessment, right? So the hospitality and the service industries being one particular area that just maybe needs a little more attention this year than maybe even the next time the LRTP is updated is one thought that we had. And the other one that we think is going to continue to be a problem is just the delivery services that we saw during the pandemic. We don't feel like they're going to go away. And it's really hard to figure out, is Is that a nuisance that we're trying to control? Is it something that we are just accepting is going to happen? Like we as a city, we don't know how we're going to respond, but it is an important thing that's not really well kind of contextualized in this part of the needs assessment or other parts of the needs assessment. So just finding a home for that conversation and just kind of figuring out where it makes the most sense, I think, is one other comment that we had. And then the third one, and I'll keep it to this one, I think this is the last one that we came up with, was, you know, how does remote work play into what we think about the future? Clearly, the state just released their study, which, you know, honestly, I took with a big grain of salt, and I'm not sure whether it's totally correct or not. But, you know, there's been people thinking about it. And yeah, does this mean that more of the suburban communities out there on 128 and 495 are actually going to have more people at home during the day than they do nowadays, right? Or than they did before the pandemic. And that plays into a conversation about economic development in those communities that it doesn't play out so well for Cambridge and Boston, but right, like, you know, does then that mean, how does it shift? And, you know, maybe getting a page where we just kind of dissect that report and just see how it plays out in the economic vitality kind of realm would be really helpful, I think, for folks who are thinking about these questions all the time. So those are my three things that I just wanted to mention today.
Thanks, Andy. And that's definitely the third point came up a lot in the big ideas. So obviously, because everybody was in the thick of it at that point. So that definitely will be something brought to the MPO to consider during scenario planning.
John?
Yeah, just to build off of what Andy was saying or asking about the delivery services. Again, I think that impacts the future of the curb again, and it almost extends that study farther out into the suburbs as we're getting, I mean, Amazon is just growing like crazy in terms of dominating curbs in residential areas, not just commercial downtowns or main streets. So, you know, that's, again, delivery services, futures of the curb, and are they considered freight? Or are they considered, you know, kind of sort of something in between as another class, I guess. Anyway, just a thought.
Well, I'll reemphasize what Andy said about the tables. I mean, and you said it too, and that those tables were in each of the chapters, and I found those just a really good resource. I mean, to look at what was underway in terms of studies and what we were thinking about doing, and they were even more impressive, I thought, for some of the other chapters. You know, and one comment, maybe a disagreement with the statement was on page 9.9. It was about trucks, trade and all. It says truck drivers stuck in traffic need to be compensated for their time. The payroll and the vehicle costs of truck operations are reflected in the cost of products and services. And, you know, I mean, it may be, it may not be, reflected in the cost of the services, because there are sometimes the market is such that the producer has to eat the costs, because the market just won't allow them to increase their prices and so they have to absorb those costs. I'm not sure if we are in that kind of a market now, but it's not always the case that when the costs go up for a supplier, or for the seller, that the buyer has to pay it. So it's just a little economic quibble. I mean, it's more of a question. I mean, as opposed to saying that it's not right. I guess what I'm saying is that it's not globally the case. I mean, that the buyer has to take on that the seller can pass along the cost, I mean, to the buyer. But that's it. And just a little minor thing.
And just to let you know, so these tables in each of the chapters, so when you get into chapter 10, all of the recommendations that are part of chapter 10 come from those tables. So that just when you're looking through that, and then we have some descriptions of what the actual programs are as well. So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, chapter 10 is just going to be like a little wrap up for us. I mean, it'll remind us of what we have gone through in this last year or so, and that'll be it. And maybe we'll have shorter meetings as a result. But I hope people got something out of it, and I sure did. And I think John did. I think Andy did, and hope the rest of you from listening and appreciate it on some level. But once again, just really impressed me, and I'm looking forward to being impressed again in the next LRTP. So that's it, and feel free to
So-
stay. Go ahead.
So can I ask, do you have any summary of any recommendations that you would have for us, or just basically, reviewing what you talked about at the meetings? But I didn't know if you, like, for a wrap up.
It was really just to get us
To
really
get-
familiar with the what's needed, because there's a lot of detail to what's needed. I mean, I have taken a lot notes myself. I just kind of pulled out mostly cut and paste things that I found relevant or important. I could put those all together, but I don't think they would do anything for you. And I think I might use them as things to jog my memory when I go back at the next LRTP. But once again, that's not really to tell you how to do the next LRTP or what to include in it. If anything, I'd say, I mean, your format's very good. I suppose you can improve on it. I'm not quite sure how, but there's certainly nothing that's in it that I would take away from it. And certainly sometimes I think people are inclined to say, oh, there's so much there, we have to simplify it. But when you do that, you usually lose a lot of information. So if you do simplify, like the main presentation of it, then please keep this information in an appendix or something like that, because it's just so
Right.
valuable.
So basically, it is a big document, and you got to search for what you're looking for. We're hoping to make this an online document, not even a document, just an online website, so you could search what you're looking for, and it would all be, you could find the information you needed and find all of the information on that one subject. We're still working on it, but
Yeah.
but this table, we are going to keep those tables,
Right.
definitely.
Well, I still hope that you crank out or a PDF of it, or you keep a format where you can where you are in a position to read the entire thing from top to bottom, and know that you're reading the whole thing, because MassDOT has done something like that for its CIP, and I think I can still get the PDF of it. But I remember there was one year where you were hard pressed to like get the entire thing, and so you're kind of like going through sections at a time, and oh, well, anyways, if that's where you go, that's where you go. I'll adapt, but it'd be nice if you were able to grab the whole thing at some point.
Okay.
John, hand back.
Yeah, I really got a lot of use out of it. Just get to crystallize what the impacts and dynamics are now versus what they were at a moment in time before January 2020, and where things are and where they may rest, and how the situations and the solutions have really, in many cases, just totally changed. So it's helped frame that and serve as a springboard moving forward.
Yeah. And I thought the public comment part was really well done. You said that you kind of put them into categories or whatever, you kind of condensed them down, but there were still a lot of them there. So I appreciate the fact that you retain a certain level of granularity so we could see more of the public comments than fewer, because there are just a lot of good comments out there. And one quick question, I can go and look for this myself. You mentioned on 914 the completion of MassDOT's statewide economic impact evaluation study. That's available, right? If I go searching for it, I can find it.
I have to check.
Okay, well, I'll look for it. So that's about it. So if there's anything that you want us to, any information or any advice or something you want us to give you, and with respect to the needs assessment for the next RFP, we can take that on. This was more to inform us, but if you want us with what we've done, inform you in some additional way, just let us know.
Okay, and I mean, if you would like to provide comments, or, as you said, maybe this was just a way for you to be familiar with it. So when we bring the new needs assessment out, you'll know and be able to comment, knowing what you've seen before.
Yeah.
So, but if there's any, I've taken down the notes here on, you want to keep the tables, the summary tables, and you like the public comments and whatever. So I've taken the notes down from this chapter, and if there's anything you want us to know from the other chapters, just let us know.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm just gonna repeat myself to the point that maybe it'll seem insincere if I keep going. So I'll just stop there. And so feel free to stay around. And I think how much time do we have left?
Slightly over half an hour.
Okay, great. We'll boogie along. So chair's report. So I think we had, I don't know if it was the record. Hold on a second. John, do you have a hand back up? No? No, I guess not. He's muted. Yeah. Probably not. Okay. Well, John, if you want to say something, John McQueen, if you want to say something, just chime in. I'm going to chair's report.
No, my mistake. I left it up.
No problem. And so I don't know if we had a record short MPO meeting, but it was certainly very short last time. And to be honest, I'm blanking out on what was in it. I'll go back maybe at some point if someone else is talking and see. But the most important thing that's going on nowadays is in my opinion, there's an ad hoc committee that is looking into dealing with cost increases projects. So we've had 2 of those meetings, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that. Because initially I was supporting strongly the notion that the MPO should try to help municipalities do the design work, take on that cost. And what became clear to me in the last meeting is that if you do that, then essentially you are committing to the project. And if you decide not to follow through on the project, then that money has to be paid back. And then that would fall on the municipality. So you really haven't helped them out. I think the only way we could get around that is if the state would say we'll pay that money back, and that may not be as far-fetched as it sounds, and I'll probably ask this at the next meeting because it just occurred to me a couple of days ago when I was thinking about this, because the state does actually take on the 20% match. So in my understanding is that in most MPOs, the feds put up 80%, and then the municipality or whatever other party it is puts up to 20%. But in our case, the state puts up the 20%. So it may not be the case that the state couldn't then say, okay, well, we're going to do the design work for you. And to the extent that MassDOT is part of the board, and it's helped coordinate this process, it might be possible. So I may suggest that. If any of you listening to this, either now or later, think that's not a good idea, I certainly welcome your input, and I certainly welcome your input on any other aspect of this issue. If you go back and you look at the agenda for the last ad hoc meeting, which was on the 8th, I think, last week, there was a link to a presentation on this issue, from 2016. that raised a lot of questions that we're asking now. And so if you look at that, I'd be interested in your answers to those questions. I just recently got or found out that I now have access to the minutes from that meeting. So I'm going to go and look at the minutes of that meeting, maybe any follow-on meetings to see how people answered those questions or didn't answer them, X number of years ago, whatever number of years ago. But if you have some insights, please pass them along, because not only might be helpful for me in thinking about things, but I can speak for you, even if I don't agree. So that's that on the ad hoc committee. And with respect to the UPWP, well, I'll save that for the next item on the agenda. So any questions about the chair's report? All right, and so the next agenda item is the 3C Documents Committee. So tomorrow we should have the release of the UPWP, and leading up to this, we had a meeting on the 1st, and it was an interesting meeting in that I think a lot of us wanted to see the congestion pricing study done. And there were good arguments for not doing it. There were subtle arguments, and they were good arguments. And what won the day, though, was that we couldn't go back and try to get some funding for that study because there just wasn't enough time to do it. It needed to be put together by this week. And so it really gave us no time to say, okay, well, can we take money from some other studies and maybe do a little bit of this? But overall, I don't think that's going to be a bad thing, because I think we can work and get a much better kind of congestion pricing study done. I think one that really gets at what people would like to see come out of such a study, because I think what was proposed wasn't going to be close enough to what people wanted. So we would have gotten it, and then people, I think, would have been, and people, including myself, would have been disappointed or not as pleased by what would have happened, what would have come out of the study had it been done. So that's where I am on that. But anyways, that will come out tomorrow. And so we need to decide on what we are going to do. Normally we make a statement about it, and that's in our 3C Documents Committee. Our chair of that committee has departed the committee, the RTAC, that was Chris Porter. And so not only do we need another person, but we need a chair. We don't need just one other person. We need as many people who are willing to participate in it. But we'll certainly need another chair and someone who is going to be willing to lead the charge on this. So it would be good if we could make some decisions about that today. Maybe not the chair, but we'll certainly have to make a decision as to when we are going to have that committee meet. So if Wednesdays are a good day for folks, then I would propose 2 Wednesdays from now for an hour and a half. So I guess that would be on the 28th, for an hour and a half.
So Len, I'm sorry to jump in here. Just to be clear, on this meeting currently, there are 3 people who are part of the 3C Documents Committee. That would be you, Len, it would be John McQueen, and Anna Christina. That being said, everybody is free to participate, and I think it would be great if we got some new people into the committee. I don't want to strong arm people to do it, but to Len's point, I think in the absence of Chris, I think having as many hands on deck as possible would be good. And it's always good to have a diversity of voices. So it's, if you can believe it, it's even more laid back than RTAC. So just the formal meetings. So low pressure, just bouncing ideas around. I'd really encourage people to attend.
Yeah.
Do you know when the next meeting is? Just so I can put it in the calendar.
Well, I was proposing, on the 28th, on the next meeting for what?
For the 3C.
Oh, so, yeah. So I was proposing, that we make it on the 28th, around the same time as we have this meeting, 2:30, 3 o'clock. It can be whatever though.
So I will say that in the chat, John has indicated that, John McQueen, that is, has indicated that the week of the 26th does not work for him.
Well, being a member of the committee, then that doesn't work. So then, Mr. McQueen, do you want to suggest another week, another date? Well, so we would have to have these comments in 30 days, right, Matt?
Yes, correct. So if we met theoretically the following week on the 4th, that would still work. I think it's going to wind up being, I want to say the 15th is when they would need to be in, I want to say.
Okay, sorry, I just have a little chat going on back here. So that would give us, so we'd have time for our next full TAC meeting, right? Full RTAC meeting.
Yes, so
Okay,
that is a factor here, which is that, ordinarily we don't have a meeting, an advisory council meeting in August. This year, because of the UPWP schedule, we will need to have one in order to approve comments on the UPWP. So obviously lots of people take time off during this time, but we would need a quorum. We barely have a quorum today. So to the best of people's ability to attend the meeting on the 11th, that would be really great. I just wanted to wedge that in there. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's right. It was good timing, because we're trying to work out things now, and just keep in mind, it will be remote. And
yes,
and if you can't stay for the whole meeting, if you just like chime in for the beginning of it, we can run through this element in the 3C document at the very beginning, and then you can go, and then those of us who want to talk about chapter 10 and other needs assessment can do so. So just want to make it as easy as possible for people to show up so that we can sign off on the letter. Now, the other thing is that we don't have to do the letter. And this isn't any passive aggressive thing. It's just a matter of, well, if you don't think it's worth the while, and understandably, we're all kind of still recovering mentally from the pandemic, and you just really want to take some time off. I totally get that. But for those of us who want to work on it, I think we'll get something from working on it. And if nothing else, we can think things through and decide on what we want to see, in the next UPWP. I know it seems like it's getting ahead of itself, but I think we need to think through this congestion pricing thing. And also we need to think through how it is that we get ourselves into situations where we all of a sudden have to make a decision when we need more time to deliberate. In this case, what happened is that there was less money than originally thought for doing studies, so they had to cut back, and so that was the study that was cut. Makes sense, but if we wanted to kind of alter that, then we are in a position where we didn't have the time, to do any altering. And it's probably just a matter of the calendar and what happened this year, and that there's no way we need to avoid a situation like that, but at least we can think about it and see if there's something we can do so we don't find ourselves in a position like this. So I'm just trying to drum up some reason for us to have the 3C committee meeting. And I think I'm going to nominate David Montgomery, as a new member of the committee and chair. If one of the current members don't want to be chair. So.
We can maybe talk about that a little bit more offline. I'm not sure exactly how we would feel about that. But I will say that a previous member of the committee was Tegan, who represented Cambridge. So, Mr. Reeker, if you want to slot into that, you'd be more than welcome. But at the same time, no pressure.
I'm feeling strong-armed.
I apologize.
No, I was actually just gonna find the moment to say I would be happy to participate on the committee. So that totally works for me. In terms of a timing of a meeting, I don't know if I can contribute. I am quite busy. So like adding my schedule to the conversation is probably not a good thing, but if there's a date that works, I can work other stuff around to make sure that I can participate in a committee meeting.
So John, McQueen, Anna, Christina. And that's a nice way of saying if only Len would stop talking, I could chime in here. Nice going, Andy. Thank you.
I can actually still be on the committee and attend the meetings. The only days that have changing for me right now are Thursdays, and that's at nighttime. So I just need to know, like, if you can, as much in advance as possible, just in case. I don't want any scheduling conflicts.
Right. Well, if the week of the 26th isn't going to work for John McQueen, then that leaves next week. And then so, I mean, I'd rather aim for an earlier week, than a later week, because if we then miss that later week, then, well,
I can do next week every day, but Tuesday and Thursdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays are just not good.
What about next Wednesday?
Did you want to do the meeting next Wednesday? I can do that. I can do that.
John, Andy?
I can do Tuesday. I have an MRI on Wednesday, so I can't.
Yeah, I could do Tuesday morning, and or after 3 on Tuesday. So either
Yeah, it would
Tuesday.
have to be. Yeah, definitely. If it's a Tuesday, because I have a standing meetings, 2 of them on Tuesdays. But after 3, can we do after 4? Is that okay? I'm okay with late nights or even weekends.
I would have a hard stop at 5 on Tuesday, and so if we could do like maybe 3:30 to 5, but then I have a hard stop. The rest of you can keep going.
And no, I have meetings at 3, so I can't do Tuesdays.
Okay, gotcha. You said not Tuesdays and Thursdays, right?
Yeah, Tuesday and Thursday are my worst.
Right, gotcha.
Like I said, Tuesdays I could do, but it would have to be like after 4.
Gotcha. Friday?
Hold on, I'm sorry. Friday. Yo, Friday's good. Friday I can do after 12. I have a meeting from 9 a.m. to noon, but that's government affairs. Oh.
Anyone else?
Friday also works for me after 12 o'clock.
John McQueen?
After 1 o'clock.
All right. And so that would give Ann and Christina a break. So
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm hard pressed to schedule someone for another meeting after 3 hours of meetings because I know that's really hard on me. So why don't we say what about 1:30 to 3?
30 to 3 next Friday. Okay.
That works for everybody?
Me.
All right.
Are you gonna send out the Zoom invite for it?
Yes,
or-
I will send that out tomorrow.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's great. Fantastic.
That's gonna make some riveting YouTube video.
Maybe we should talk about it now because technically speaking, we have to. Oh, never mind. I'm not even going to get into it. That will be a fun video. I'll just say that.
So I am. So the next item on the agenda is meeting minutes.
Oop.
Okay. All right. And so new business. Anybody? All right, folks. So our next meeting.
I'm sorry. I see that Andy has his hand
Okay,
up.
Andy. Yeah, thank you.
And it took me a while to find my mute. So I just wanted to share a couple of things. First off, I don't know if you all have heard that Cambridge at the end of 2020 passed an ordinance which requires actually the creation of separated bike lanes on a particular timeline on many of our streets. And so city staff have actually been working at developing a plan that allows us to be able to create about almost 25 miles of separated bike lanes along many of our major streets in Cambridge in the next 5 years. So, I just wanted to, just kind of share that, while we're doing that, we're also taking a look at things that we could do to also improve conditions for people, on foot and people in buses at the same time. So we're taking a look at, not only improving conditions for people cycling, but also, people who are taking transit, that we can find ways to get them through traffic a little bit quicker and more efficiently and stuff like that. But there's been a lot of materials that we've posted online at our traffic, parking, and transportation department's page. So if folks are interested in trying to see how Cambridge is working within some tough constraints, I just wanted to actually share that kind of new thing that we have been doing. And so, I'm happy to send along a link to Matt so he can distribute to folks. But I just wanted to share that in the next few years, if you're coming to Cambridge, please don't expect that the street that you drove on today is going to look like the street that you drive on whenever you do visit next. We are actually, under the gun to do a lot of transportation projects here. So, some exciting times, but, also a lot of stuff is happening. Just wanted to share.
Great. No, that's good. And if you can somehow make it possible for the 77 to just keep zipping out of Arlington into Howard Square, we'd love that. Bikes and buses just zipping along Mass Ave. So Jen?
Hi. So first, I just wanted to up Andy's comment of checking out the work. I got a chance to attend one of the virtual meetings they had on that on the plans, and it is a lot and very exciting to see those changes, and hopefully it's not it's an amount of things that staff can take on, and they get a lot of support for that too. I also just wanted to, for those who weren't here at the very beginning, just say that I plan to attend the advisory council on behalf of Boston going forward. So I just wanted to say hi to folks. I know I've met, I think, everyone on this call, potentially, when I worked at MPO staff. But really great to see you all again, and excited to be part of these conversations.
Well, it's great when people, who have worked for an organization come back to be a part of it. And so your knowledge and your insight is very valuable, but then it makes us feel like it's worth your while. And given that you have choices, meaning what you can do, it's gratifying and motivating at the same time. So thank you. Look forward to working with you and learning from you even more.
Thanks, Len.
Yeah. So with that, can we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thanks,
Second.
Stacey. Thanks. And
Second.
thank you. So we're, without any objection, we will adjourn. Bye-bye, everybody.